Number 10. Marvel. When Captain Marvel came out, there was a lot of backlash surrounding the film for many reasons, but I'm not here to talk about the SJW stuff. I am here to talk about some changes made to one specific character, Mar-Vell. In the story, the character of Mar-Vell was gender swapped and played by Annette Bening, who I personally thought did a great job as the Kree scientist slash superhero. But why did we gender swap the role? I'm a big fan of gender swaps when they are done well and they mean something, but many people were left to ask why this has been swapped. It didn't seem to inform any relevant changes to the character. Was it because they simply preferred Bening for that role? Or was it to convey an air of mystery in regards to who Mar-Vell was in the story? And if it's the latter, making a great change to the character's alias should have also then happened. As much as I like the idea of the change being plot driven, they then made her alias Wendy Lawson. An obvious parallel for comic fans to the comic book Mar-Vell's Walter Lawson. So yeah, this gender swap didn't really feel relevant and as such left people asking unsatisfied, but why though? Number 9. Cyclops eliminates Professor X. There was a time when Professor X was seen as a full-fledged hero, a brilliant man with a desire only to see and create harmony and equality in the world. Isn't that nice? Since his introduction, however, more and more seeds of doubt kept cropping up when it came to his methods in terms of training his X-Men and attempting to achieve his lofty goals. By the time the Phoenix Five had come about, many mutants and readers were divided on just how heroic and good Professor X really was. Still, when Cyclops, in a Phoenix-induced rage, was approached by Xavier, who tried to reason with Scott and calm him down as his sort of father figure and mentor, we all suspected Scott would listen. Instead, Scott completely obliterated Professor Xavier, and regardless of your mixed feelings about Professor X, the scene was pretty tragic. Even Scott admitted, despite being under the influence of the Phoenix Force, that he had done wrong, and even agreed that he should atone for the murder. Granted, this wasn't the first time Professor X had died, but it was one of his darkest deaths, being killed by one of his most prized students. Number 8. Deadpool kills his parents. Wade Wilson, being an insane mercenary and former assassin, is of course one of the darker characters Marvel has to offer. And yet even Deadpool for the most part manages to keep things pretty humorous and light. This is a dude who refers to all vampires as Draculas. This is a hero who is so insane it's basically humorous and who uses jokes to likely mask his own pain. But despite being a regular comedian, Deadpool has gone through some pretty dark and crazy times and done and seen some pretty crazy stuff. One such dark adventure of his was during the time he was brainwashed by Butler into killing his parents. Deadpool of course did not know who they were. He appears to recognize items in the house like an old baseball glove that perhaps once belonged to him in another life, but a job's a job, he reasons. He dismisses his gut instinct and burns the house to the ground while his parents are asleep upstairs, completely unaware of course that they are his parents. Even Sabretooth feels bad about this incident. Number 7. Really close brother-sister relationship. Scarlet Witch and her brother Quicksilver have always been close in the comics, but one series in alternate reality took their relationship a little too far. The Wanda Maximoff of Earth 1610, the Ultimates reality, has an even closer relationship, and creepier one, with her brother it seems. In Ultimates 3, writer Jeff Loeb decided to confirm that their flirtations were, well, more than that, and that brother and sister were actually in a romantic and very physical relationship with one another. Even more dark and disturbing, Pietro also compliments his sister on how she looks more and more like their mother every day before getting it on with her. Brings a whole new meaning to the phrase keeping it in the family. Ick. Number 6. Death of Daken. Last issues of comic series often tend to be the most epic, and for 2010's Uncanny X-Force, that expectation held true. Although the climax of the story ended up being a lot more tragic and dark than happy and celebratory. Daken ends up being manipulated by Sabretooth, who proves here how much of a master strategist he can be when it leads to Wolverine being forced to take out Daken, drowning him in a puddle. Wolverine holds back during the beginning of the fight, feeling the weight of what he knows he must do, and when he does end up striking out full force, it's Daken's dreams and thoughts we see in between panels of his father drowning him. Daken imagines what life being raised by Logan, being a family unit, would be like. It's heart-wrenching. And afterwards, Sabretooth is there to gloat and reveal that Wolverine killing Daken was all because of his machinations. Just another way, maybe one of the worst ways, that Sabretooth has wounded Logan over the years. Such a well-written, such a sad story, ugh.
Number 5. Itsu Akihiro. So last video I did was on the many romances of Wolverine, and most of the ladies in Logan's life end up meeting a dark and cruel fate, like Itsu Akihiro, the woman Logan met while he was in Japan after World War II. She was living in Jasmine Falls and met Logan during his 4th year of training with Bando Saburo, who at the time was teaching him how to be a man and leave the warrior nature in his past. Now the two had fallen in love at this point, and shortly after she was expecting a baby. So one day Logan was proving himself worthy of being a man, and more importantly as a father, during a combat exercise. And then an explosion caught him off guard and one of his claws popped out and he accidentally stabbed a villager. And then he was banned from the village. So then he went to go say goodbye to Itsu in their home and he found her dead. Now who's to blame here but again the Winter Soldier. Yep, he was acting under Romulus's order in order to get Logan out of hiding and back to Madripoor. And let's just say the plan kind of worked.
Number 4. Zombieverse. Another alternate world, and in this case slew of series, that managed to be even darker than Old Man Logan belong to the place we refer to as the Zombieverse, or the alternate Earth of 2149. Here all of your favorite heroes have died or been replaced by zombies, or likely a little bit of both. This reality is where we saw Spider-Man eat Aunt May and MJ, unable to stop himself from killing them. We also see She-Hulk eat Valerian, Franklin Richards, the children of her teammates and friends from the Fantastic Four. It's also the alternate world where Hank Pym's Ant-Man keeps Black Panther alive so he can slowly saw off pieces of him and eat them while they're fresh to satiate his hunger. Ugh, the Zombieverse it's really something else. I have to go there so often and I'm just like, man, sometimes I wish I could just not go there. Number 3. Hydra Cap. Captain America is known for being one of the most good, most noble characters that Marvel has. He's kind of like Marvel's Superman when it comes to ideals. He stands for liberty, freedom, and justice. He's got a bit of a classic honesty to him as well, being a hero sort of launched out of time or displaced out of time. So it shocked everyone when it was revealed that he was a long-time sleeper agent for Hydra, dun dun dun, and had been playing us this whole time. Of course, he hadn't. Well, he had, but it wasn't necessarily by choice. Reality had been altered when an organic, child-appearing version of the Cosmic Cube, known as Kobek, was influenced by Red Skull, and then attempted to revive a dying Steve Rogers, turning him into, you know, the Steve Rogers that we had when he was part of Hydra. Alternate Steve Rogers. Number 2. We're in the endgame now. When Thanos was revealed to be the biggest bad that the Marvel Cinematic Universe had yet to face, the supervillain who'd been plotting in the background of the film since almost the beginning, we were all pretty confident that all of our heroes united could take him down, right? If not, we were waiting for the teased-at Adam Warlock to appear out of the sky and Deus Ex Machina us out of this mess. But in the Avengers film Infinity War, that is not what happened. Instead, Thanos showed up and with the help of his goon squad, the Black Order, ended up managing to defeat Earth's mightiest heroes and get his hands on the Infinity Stones. Thor arrived just in time to stop him, but keeping things PG with his aim and targeting Thanos' chest instead of his head, well, that would come back to haunt him. Thanos managed to also defeat Thor and snap 50% of the universe out of existence, giving us some of the darkest times our heroes had seen yet, and some of the saddest death scenes in the MCU when we lost teenage Groot and Peter Parker. Sad. Number 10. Hawkeye kills Black Widow. We tend to talk a lot on Top 10 Nerd about one of the darkest areas of Marvel's comic lines and alternate worlds, the Ultimates, the Earth of 1610. In this reality, Black Widow becomes a villain after betraying Tony Stark. While her betrayal of Iron Man and her fellow teammates is a dark enough story, we're going to talk about what happens after the betrayal that we all tend to focus on more. Hawkeye ends up being betrayed by Natasha as well. His entire family is slaughtered because of her, and he is taken in, questioned, and tortured. Brutally tortured. Because in the Ultimates reality, he actually has a family, similar to the one that you actually see in the MCU. Clint impressively escapes his captors using only his detached fingernails as weaponized projectiles to take them out. He then hunts down Natasha, who was incapacitated by Tony and is in the hospital. Hawkeye kills her with an arrow to the head, but only after he pins her hands to the walls with arrows. Youch. The whole thing is pretty dark. Number 9. Strange Academy. Strange Academy's first issue was just recently released early March 2020, but when the comic was first announced, it was met with lots of mixed feelings from Marvel fans, and fans of another popular franchise. See if you can guess which one. The idea around Strange Academy was to spin a yarn about a school of uniquely magically gifted youngsters who join an academy in New Orleans to hone their powers. Sounding familiar yet? Many took to Twitter to share their outrage for what was deemed a potential ripoff of many other magically based series and fandoms involving academies. Yep, one of them being, you guessed it, the magical world of Harry Potter. Of course, the first issue is out now, so this is one people can now read up on and decide for themselves if this backlash was warranted or not. Number 8. First openly gay character. In the MCU, that is. When it was rumored that the first openly gay character in the Marvel Cinematic Universe would finally appear after more than 20 films, people were of course excited and eager to find out who the character was and to learn more about them and their story. All the excitement unfortunately only led to disappointment and outrage from fans when we found out that the character, played by Joe Russo himself, was only in 10 seconds of the 3-hour film. 10 seconds, that's all we got. The character was simply an unnamed civilian who is part of a support group led by Steve Rogers himself, seeking to help those who lost loved ones during the snap. What do we discover about him? Well, we discovered that he simply lost his partner and is trying to get back into dating again. He had no importance in regards to the main narrative, and while the filmmakers had good intentions when it came to including an openly gay character, his lack of substance or importance made people feel like Marvel was merely pandering. People had been looking for more meaningful representation, though Kevin Feige and the Marvel and Disney team responded to the backlash, assuring fans that more genuine overall diversity in the world of supers could be expected in the next phase. Number 7. Quicksilver dies. Quicksilver is known for being one of the fastest, if not the fastest person in the Marvel Universe. His need for speed has saved the Marvel Universe more than once, and he's a popular and well-known character and stable among the superhero community. And yet, in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, he was reduced to death by bullet. Yep. A guy who in the world of Fox Marvel X-Men can apparently move fast enough to save the entire occupants of the X-Mansion, Fish included, from an explosion as it is in the midst of happening. Really? Really, Disney and Marvel? Really, you gonna do them like that? Number 6. Iceman comes out. Okay, so you know me, I'm all for having gay characters and supers in the Marvelverse. I'm even for retconning some characters' sexual orientations to provide a more diverse cast when it comes to some of our original super teams' makeup. Because, you know, they were all really straight at the beginning there, because it was the 50s and the 60s. But this retcon got a lot of backlash for a reason that I would say is pretty understandable. Not what was being done, but really more how it was done. A common complaint among Marvel fans when it comes to decisions and retcons that are made for our most beloved characters. The fact that a younger Bobby Drake and a younger Jean Grey from the past had to convince him of his sexuality was weird. Like, why did he have to realize that he'd been gay all along? Why couldn't this have just been a thing that he realized in the present by himself? It just felt very put upon as opposed to being natural and organic. Many people rediscover their sexual orientation and sexuality every day. It isn't like you have to always know from the beginning. It can be more fluid than that. And the way this was written in and then later kind of dropped again made the whole thing feel kind of, well, forced, and like they were using it. Like I said, I like that they made this choice, but like many, I wish that they'd executed the moment of revelation with a bit more grace, and not by saying that if you aren't in love with Jean Grey, you must be gay. Not everyone has to be in love with Jean Grey, guys, okay? Just because you're an X-Men, you don't have to be in love with Jean Grey. Stop it. It's weird. Number 5. Apolitical politics. Art Spiegelman is known as one of the most acclaimed comic writers. He even won a Pulitzer Prize for his graphic novel Mouse. When asked to write an introductory essay for a collection of Marvel works, a phrase referring to Donald Trump as an orange skull was highlighted by the editing team, who said that due to Marvel's editorial policy, it would have to be omitted in order for the introductory essay to make it to print in regards to the collection. Spiegelman was slightly surprised and ended up rescinding his essay as a result. This news led to much backlash from both the Marvel and general comic book fan community alike, who criticized Marvel for making political statements only when it was safe or could be used to make them more money, and hiding behind an apolitical policy when they were too afraid to make statements. Let's not forget that Marvel themselves created a villainous version of Trump in 2016's Spider-Gwen annual, known as MODAK, and yet they can't have that phrase in an essay. I mean, what are you doing, Marvel? Which one are we doing here? Number 4. Nova brutally disembowels Annihilus. This has got to be one of the most violent kills we've seen in the pages of a Marvel comic. During Annihilation in issue 6, we saw Nova, aka Richard Rider, take on Annihilus and succeed in defeating him. But he didn't just defeat him, he disemboweled him. And not in a conventional way either, but by reaching down his throat. That's right, the brutal and violent end happened by Nova punching down down into analysis throughout, so far in fact that he somehow reached his organs. I don't know how that scientifically works, but there you go. And he pulled specifically what appeared to be his intestines out through his mouth. Quite intense. I don't think you can actually do that to someone, but I'm not gonna ask if it's possible because I don't want to know. Number 3. Fake mutants. That moment when Marvel retconned the origins of Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver, declaring that they were no longer, nor had they ever truly been, mutants. Excuse me? In Uncanny Avengers Volume 2 Issue 4, it was confirmed that these two were not mutants, but had been disguised as mutants by the High Evolutionary, who had experimented on them, got bored, and disguised them as mutants, just for funsies. But this whole retcon really started during the Axis event. During Axis, Wanda basically found out through a magical blood test, as the results came flooding in, that Magneto was not her father. Although Quicksilver was confirmed as her biological brother, which, given everything that was implied between the two in the Ultimate Universe, and their intense love for one another even in the main continuity, would have actually been something that I think we'd prefer retconned out of existence. Please, tell us they aren't related. The retcon of Pietro and Wanda Maximoff not being related to Magneto or being considered mutants was something that made years of family drama and much of House of M feel irrelevant, which I think is why people kind of felt, betrayed by this. Number 2. Avengers vs. Martin Scorsese. This backlash from Marvel fans was not directed at Marvel itself, but instead at Martin Scorsese, who remarked that MCU films were more about entertainment than the art of cinema. Fans not only revolted against the famed director, but also revolted against those who sided with him, which oddly enough included 2015's Fantastic Four film director and writer Josh Trank. Although he deleted the tweet after, he originally posted on Twitter his opinion of a genre of films that he actually was oddly enough a part of, despite the fact that FF was not really part of the MCU, saying, "Watching The Irishman, the first 5 minutes have more humanity and truth and cinematic intrigue than the running length of every single Marvel movie combined. Ah, sorry, facts. P.S. not sorry." Wow, hashtag troll life. Number 1. Snowflake and the New Warriors. I mean, you knew we were going to talk about this, right? The New Warriors was always meant to be a team about radicalizing the world of heroes. They were meant to be edgy and relatable to the youth of today. But this version of the New Warriors takes that commitment a little too far, and while trying to make themselves more relatable, only seems to end up inevitably distancing the very people they want to attract. The backlash surrounding the New Warriors is not about what they're trying to do, but like with most things, the lack of tact they seem to be able to exhibit while reinventing this squad of supers. It's almost like the squad was made without anyone actually reaching out and conversing with the groups that they're meant to represent. Oh, wait. The most problematic of the new heroes appears to be Snowflake and Safe Space. Snowflake is the first Marvel superhero to be explicitly labeled as non-binary. Cool, but why are we calling them Snowflake? Add in the fact that Safe Space, another term that is often made fun of online and often thrown around in a condescending way in regards to the LGBTQ community, is the name of Snowflake's twin, and that the two are described as a binary pair. And you already have more cringe to add to an already pretty cringy problem. Especially when you look at how the two are often drawn together, how they hold one another. Anyone else getting some icky Maximoff twincest vibes here? No, just me? Ooh. Number 10. Venom's deadly French kiss. Venom is already known for being a brutal and twisted character in general, especially when he acts as a villain, yet he's still one of the most popular characters around, no matter his alignment. In 2003's Venom in issue 11, we saw him take on the Thing from the Fantastic Four, and use a weird talent we didn't really need to know that he had. Venom is attempting to drag away Spider-Man's unconscious body when the Thing bursts through a wall, aiming to prevent him from doing so by tackling him. Venom responds by telling the Thing it's blobberin' time and shoots out his tongue, essentially giving the Thing an immobilizing and disturbingly painful looking French kiss. Fortunately, Human Torch comes in on the next page to put a stop to Venom, but this graphic image won't be as easily burned away. In fact, just the opposite. It'll be burned into your mind. The cover of this issue says it all, featuring just Venom's long and slimy looking tongue. Ew. Number 9. Loki and Thor brutalize the Fantastic Four. This one came to us from a what if story where we saw both Loki and Thor team up to take on Marvel's first family, the Fantastic Four. During this fight, we got a brutal moment where Ben Grimm, as the Thing, tries to shout out his famous catchphrase while battling Thor. It's clobberin' time! But before he can get that final word out, time, Thor smashes his jaw off with his hammer. Youch. Meanwhile, Invisible Woman Sue Storm is also in trouble. She is attempting to protect herself using a force field she created, but Loki reverses the polarity of her powers, so all the energy she is projecting outward instead folds in on her, causing her to be crushed beneath its weight and looking almost skeletal as a result in one panel. She's like, I'm dying. Number 8. Gamora kills Eros. In a surprising turn of events, Gamora was forced to take the life of her uncle Star Fox following the revelation that the Black Order would be using him and not Gamora, as he had previously thought, to bring Thanos back to life. Much to the dismay of Star-Lord, Gamora did not hesitate to kill her uncle Eros, Thanos' brother, though at least she did seem sorry to have to do it. But if it meant preventing Thanos' return, well, then she was more willing to do the deed, stabbing Star Fox right through the chest with her sword. Number 7. Kitty is forced to kill Wolverine. Kitty's kills can be pretty gruesome when they happen because of her phasing powers. In this story, Kitty was forced to kill Wolverine when he couldn't be saved from being used as Hydra's brainwashed agent in What If Wolverine Enemy of the State. Wolverine has been teleporting in, assassinating tons of Hydra's opponents, aka superheroes, and teleporting out. A team is then pulled together to finally take him down, and one of that team's members, Kitty, is one of the few left at the end. She tries to reason with Wolverine, but when that fails is forced to phase her arm through his head, turning it solid just before Wolverine slices it off. Wolverine is dead, Kitty's without an arm, and likely every reader was either left with a shocked look on their face or tears in their eyes, or both. Number 6. She-Hulk tears Vision in half. This was during one of the times in Marvel history where Scarlet Witch basically went crazy, believing the whole world to be against her and taking it out on them. During the Avenger Disassembled storyline, she was blaming the Avengers for the loss of her children, which she had altered reality to create, as, you know, Vision, her husband, was not actually capable as an artificial life form of fathering children. Wanda decided to attack the Avengers, but indirectly. She appeared to send an altered Vision to do so instead. Her influence also caused She-Hulk to go into an uncontrollable rage. When this happened, She-Hulk saw Vision as the main threat and so ripped him in half. Of course, Vision would later return. This definitely wasn't the end for him, and the two would even reconcile. But just seeing this happen in the pages of a comic was still pretty intense. Anytime someone gets ripped in half, it's pretty intense. Number 5. Hulk gets indigestion. In the alternate timeline that belongs to Old Man Logan, we witness a potential future where Logan lives on land with his wife and 2 children that is owned by the Hulk Gang. The Hulk Gang are multiple generations of Hulk's inbred family. Bruce himself is still alive and demands doubled rent from the Logans. Old Man Logan sets out to collect this rent before the due date when his family is threatened, but unfortunately does not make it back in time, despite him actually arriving early in regards to their originally agreed upon date. Logan finds his family has already been killed in his absence and sets out hell-bent on revenge. Unfortunately, Logan doesn't seem to be much of a match for Hulk, who devours him. Of course, Logan may have actually been counting on that happening. While Hulk's body attempts to digest him, Logan pops his claws and cuts his way out of Hulk's stomach. We have seen Wolverine attempt this move a couple of times in the comics, but it doesn't get any less gruesome anytime he does it, especially with Steve McNiven on pencils. Number 4. Hail Hydra. As much as there was a lot to love about this event, there was also a lot that people were left hating. Captain America ended up being revealed as a longtime Hydra sleeper agent, which was amazing considering how many times he'd publicly fought against Nazis and Hydra, only to be revealed as one of them. This is a big part of Cap's character. Of course, this mentality and plot wouldn't stay permanent. I mean, could you believe if it had? Nope, it was all a dream. Well, not quite a dream, but more an altered reality that happened as a result of some tampering with the Cosmic Cube. However, because it was so against Cap's character, this change created a lot of uproar in the comic community, with people either loving or hating this whole adventure regarding Cap and everyone else that was involved. I think the other thing a lot of people were upset about was the fact that this story felt like it was simply made for shock value, made to shock people into buying comics, because how could Cap be a Hydra agent? What's going on? You just had to find out, which honestly made the whole controversy just a little bit worse. Shock value for comics, I get it, you gotta sell comics, but also, Really? Like, that's very shocking for people that are huge fans of Captain America. Number 3. Wolverine kills everyone. Not intentionally though. In this instance, he was tricked. During Mark Millar's old Man Logan limited series, it was revealed that Mysterio tricked Wolverine into killing nearly everyone in the X-Mansion. The staff, the students, his fellow colleagues, the X-Men. There were even more deaths as the supervillains took over the world, leaving us with the dystopian future that we see in this series, but by far, the thought of Wolverine slicing up everyone that he ever considered to be close enough to consider family, believing they were intruders and that he was protecting his own fellow mutants in doing so, is shocking. Also just him holding Jubilee, I was like, no! Number 2. Black Panther becomes zombie food. In the Marvel Zombies world, Black Panther was one of the sole survivors when the zombies first attacked and turned most of his friends into zombified versions of themselves. One such former friend, Hank Pym, actually just managed to trick T'Challa into coming with him. Or, well, he almost did. He just almost. So close. Either way, Hank managed to incapacitate T'Challa, having already begun to change himself. He used Black Panther, his friend, as a food source, keeping him locked away and alive, sawing off pieces of him and slowly devouring him. Fortunately, Black Panther would escape and even become the leader of a land of survivors, although he would eventually turn into a zombie himself much later on. But that's a story for another time.
And number 1, President JFK. Why, of course this should be number 1. So in the Days Gone By storyline, the end of Volume 5 of Captain America, he recalls those Winter Soldier years as the dark days, a time where there were no birthdays, just a lot of death and killing. Too much to ever forget, is what he says. Now, amongst those that he took out, it was suggested that he took out the 35th President of the United States, which is a pretty big name to go for. So the Soviets send their top ghost assassin to disrupt global politics. Even in the MCU, this is the same. Even the actor that plays Bucky Barnes, Sebastian Stan, has said in an interview how much Steve can forget Bucky, mentioning that Steve was cool with the fact that Soviets have had his best friend brainwashed and then forced to take out the president. He's like, yeah, it's cool. It wasn't really him. He was just kind of, backseat. He actually returned as a zombie amongst other zombified US presidents, which is just insane, the fact that they do this in comics. Kicking off the list at number 10, Bucky's death. Of course, why not start at the beginning after all? So, near the end of World War II, Bucky and Cap were trying to disarm a bomb on a plane while taking down Baron Zemo in the meantime. The bomb went off, hurling Steve Rogers and Bucky into freezing cold waters. And for Cap, well, he came out of this pretty easy, as we all know. He remained frozen, just hanging out. Bucky though, good old trusty sidekick Buck, Bucky wasn't so lucky after all. His body fell into the freezing waters, and at the time, a Soviet spy submarine was in the area crossing the English Channel, so they scooped him up. Why not? It's like Alaskan crab fishermen, but with, assassins. So they fixed him up a fancy new metal arm, brainwashed him, and turned him into a brutal assassin. He has all these incredible abilities that make him a fierce fighter, but he doesn't remember how he knows these things, making him a deadly assassin and a pretty badass villain. Now this is Steve Rogers' right-hand man. One of the biggest turning points of Marvel was the introduction of the Winter Soldier. And this was also a conflict that came to life on the big screen back in 2014, and we're still watching Bucky try and weave his way through all this drama and past. It's not an easy road for the guy. Poor Buck. Yeah, it's never been easy for him. You feel bad for him. And before we go on to number 9, guys, if you could go ahead and give this video a thumbs up, because it really does a lot over for us at our channel. You guys are the best. Thank you so much for watching. Now let's keep going with this crazy list. Number 9. Red Room training. Natasha Romanova. She was trained in the Red Room since she was young, and amongst one of those leading forces of her training was the Winter Soldier. He's one of the best, so it makes sense that he passes on his skills. So Natasha was part of the Black Widow Ops program, and then he would come in and help her with combat training, while also handling the Wolf Spider Ops program. So they worked together a bit. They were all training under this big, bad roof. They even had a thing for each other briefly until he was deemed unstable and put back under cryostasis. That's gotta suck though, right? Whenever you're not being used, they're like, awesome, go clean that, and then you're frozen again until we need you in 50 years. Number 8, Jasper Sitwell. He posed as a high-ranking SHIELD agent in the MCU when in actuality he was a Hydra infiltrator. Played by Maximiliano Hernandez, Jasper Sitwell was trained at the Hydra Preparatory Academy. And he's been in Marvel movies for a while now, starting with Thor back in 2011 as just a SHIELD agent. So he met his brutal fate in Captain America Winter Soldier when Bucky straight up threw him out of a car. It was so fast, scared the life out of me in the theaters. Now this happens of course when SHIELD is compromised and all of the shady agents are called out for double dipping into Hydra. So Cap, Black Widow, and Falcon are driving Jasper Sitwell to base in order to use him as a path through the security, and he's in the middle of explaining how this plan is a horrible idea, and before he can even finish, the Winter Soldier finishes him. Before the Winter Soldier's arm comes out of nowhere and then tosses him out, interrupting him. It's great. Number 7, Stilt-Man. Stilt-Man, okay, now he may not be the coolest villain by any means, and this is coming from a guy who basically is a Stilt-Man himself. I mean, I'm a tall dude, it's tough. You bump your head on stuff a lot, you gotta kind of duck. I have back problems now because I duck too much. That's the life of a Stilt-Man. It's not easy. Now in Civil War, the villain was killed by the Punisher, but in What If House of M, we see him still hanging out with some other villains, like Shocker and Trapster. And then the Winter Soldier takes him out in one single page. It's so easy to miss. So right now, Stilt-Man is still kicking around in the main continuity. He was resurrected in 2017. So let's just hope the Winter Soldier is the one to take him out again. I mean, after all, it was done so quick. I mean, probably didn't feel much. I'm sure a good amount of people would miss this while they were reading this What If comic. It happened so fast. That's how precise Bucky is. One shot, and you're done. Number 6, Jack Monroe. He made his debut in Young Men issue 24. Now, Jack had a rough upbringing. His parents weren't the greatest by any means, and he grew up idolizing Captain America and his partner Bucky. Now, this is around 1953, right? He looked up to Bucky so much that he started referring to himself as Bucky. And when he attended school, he was taught by William Burnside, who had changed his name to Steve Rogers, and then he even got some work done on his face to match the look. Talk about a fan. So he ended up developing another Captain America serum, and he and Jack tried to be the new Bucky and Cap. Sounds like the dream team. That sounds great. So they got enhanced abilities and they took down Red Skull. They did some good work. The only thing was, a year later, things started to turn. Things started to go wrong. Yeah, they started to become paranoid schizophrenics from the serum, so the government had to put them in cryogenic suspension. Now, when they were discovered in the modern age, Jack then would go after Cap, Cap would win, and then put him back in the ice. Jack in the ice, that's some Titanic stuff right there. Eventually, after rehab, Jack was allowed to be free. So then we find at the end of Captain America issue 3, volume 5, we find him at a bar where he's drinking and he doesn't look too good. So as he's leaving this bar, he hears a voice call out to him, and then he's shot and then put in the back of a car. Who did he get shot by? Well, the Winter Soldier himself, the guy he idolized. And if you think that's bad, things only somehow got worse involving Jack Monroe, the whole bomb situation, which I'll get into a little later.
Number 5, Old Man Logan. One of the bleakest series to come out of Marvel. Old Man Logan as a character is from the alternate universe of Earth 807128, an alternate world where supervillains won against all the superheroes. This version of the character was created by Mark Millar and Steve McNiven, and has received 2 of his own series, which started out being written by Brian Michael Bendis with art by Andrea Sorrentino. The first run is not just dark in terms of its setting, but the pencils and colors also perfectly match the tone of Old Man Logan, a violent, post-apocalyptic world where Logan finds himself constantly haunted by the ghosts of his past. Dun dun dun. Ghosts.
Number 4, Tony Stark's parents. Civil War is one of my favorite Marvel movies to watch, especially when these guys finally battle it out, because there's years of history behind it. It's not just a random thing that pops up and they're like, hey, let's fight. This is a real conflict. Captain America Civil War was released in 2016, directed again by the Russo brothers, and the whole movie is politics. It's superhero politics, like in the comic, minus, the kids getting blown up at the beginning of the comic. We're gonna leave that part out. But in the film adaptation, Tony sides with the government in the Sokovia Accords. He feels responsible for the deaths, especially one of Charles Spencer at the end of Age of Ultron. And Steve, he just wants to protect Bucky. He knows that he's brainwashed, and freedom throughout the team certainly wouldn't hurt as well. Now eventually, due to Baron Zemo's sneaky little work, he gets Tony in the same room as Steve, and then it's revealed. The true reason behind Zemo's plans with the Winter Soldier was to break apart the Avengers by showing Stark footage of a brainwashed Bucky assassinate Tony's parents. And he did it in order to steal the super soldier serum, so he took out his parents and then made other super soldiers. This should count as like a twofer right here. It's a pretty wild moment. It's super dark, probably the darkest that the MCU is going in terms of like actual death and human conflict. And then the next 10 minutes in that movie were treated to Tony just trying to take out Bucky for what he did, while Steve intervenes trying to keep it cool. And then we all know where that ended up. So yeah, Bucky was kind of the reason for most of the Avengers to break up. Should be number 1, there we go. Number 3, Mother Night. Susan Scarborough made her comic book debut in Captain America issue 123. So Susan and her brother were stage hypnotists who turned to crime, which I feel like more supervillains should definitely do. Hey, if you can do magic or anything like that, for sure be a villain. If you can make something disappear, you've done it. You're now a villain. Congratulations. So yeah, they used hypnotism to put together an army. I already love these guys. Awesome. So she would take over gangs with hypnotism, which sounds like the funniest thing ever. And of course, at one point, she tried to turn over S.H.I.E.L.D. and take control. But luckily, Captain America wasn't gonna let her little magic hypnotist trick work. No, no, no. So soon she became known as Mother Night, which sounds cooler, definitely. And she started working her way up and got close to the Red Skull. She liked him. He didn't like her, not like that, you know? There was no hypnotism that was turning his heart this time. Then in part 3 of Captain America Out of Time, Union Jack finds the Red Skull men in the London Underground not alive, and one of those bodies, amongst them, was Mother Night. It was of course revealed that this was the doings of the Winter Soldier after the fact, and in order to show how dangerous this villain was, he needed to take out this hypnotist villain that has been around for 30 years. 30 years, and then it's like, hey, Bucky took him out. I lied. Number 2, Neil Tapper. This all goes down in issue 6 of Captain America, or part 6 of the Out of Time storyline. So Neil Tapper, right, he was an agent at S.H.I.E.L.D. who had a fling going on with Sharon Carter. Then they split up and Sharon went missing in Philadelphia during a mission to find Jack Monroe. Yeah, this is the same Jack Monroe that I said up there. It's got a lot of layers to it. So Neil Tapper and Nick Fury weren't getting along at this point. Neil thought that Nick wasn't doing a good job with handling Carter's disappearance, and then Fury, being Fury, gave him a stern talk, and then he joined in on the search in Philadelphia. So Sharon was found by Cap. She was with a group of bad guys, which there was also a bomb involved there. So Neil tried to deactivate the bomb, but it went off anyways. This whole bomb, this Bucky bomb thing, it's like no matter where you go, this guy's gonna be the cause of your death.
Number 1, Pop goes Doctor Strange, or his head. Ew. For this gory moment, we head to Ultimatum. I know, I'm sorry, but sometimes we gotta go back there. Now in Ultimatum, Doctor Strange took on an enemy that we've seen in battle multiple times before in the comics, Dormammu, and usually win against Dormammu even, but not this time. This time it was Dormammu who reigned victorious after using Doctor Strange's cape to strangle him to death by wrapping tightly around him. So tight in fact that Strange's head exploded. There are a lot of cons for wearing capes in a fight in terms of practicality, I know this, but this has got to be one of the most horrific instances of one that I've ever seen in the comics.